Hello everyone, Down here with the follow-up update report on the Corsair. This is Sunday afternoon. It's just after probably 2:30. I come down here to address the loose muffler, work on the flaps, and check over the engine for possible oil cooler. So there's so what I did do, I got this little temporary setup here, a piece of stainless steel banded connected to a dowel clamp. That's just to get her. So now it can just lightly move, but it's not going to drop down and hit the cowling no more. As you can probably tell, I've got some kind of upper respiratory problem going on here. Not feeling real sick, just a little tired. But you can probably hear it in my voice. It's right at the base of my throat and the top of my lungs. The coughing is trying to break stuff loose in the top of my lungs. So I was looking to get this all back together today so I could come back tonight. It's absolutely beautiful weather out there today. But I may not do it just because of the flaps. I did do what I was going to do. I drilled 2 extra holes in those little arms and so now it has 3 set screws each. I just finished putting them together and it works, but I can still pick up on it. I can still see a little bit of flexing going on. So I'm going to I'm just going to beef up that system. What I'm going to do is I was looking at going with a 3/8 inch shaft through this bar where the arm was and stepping up, but this is already a 8mm, which is 5/16, so it's only be a 1/16 inch bigger. So I think I'm actually going to go with a 1/2 inch shaft, and that way the collars I'm going to buy, they're split collars. They're steel rings. That's what's welded onto that thing that has the key in order to lock it onto the shaft. But I'm going to get a split collar that has a keyway in it, and the bottom half of that split collar will physically be welded to that ear tab that hooks up to the push rods in the wing. And then I'll have to get 4 1/2-inch bearings to remount on the front and back of the spar. I'll have to machine up new blocks to hold those new bearings, put them in 1/2-inch shaft. The arm on the back that hooks up to the linear actuator part, that's welded directly to the shaft, so it can't come loose. It can break, but it can't come loose. But the front side has to be slip-on in order to get it apart, in order to pull that shaft out and service bearings or whatever. So I'm going to beef that up, and I'll have to make 4 new arms, buy a new shaft. I only need 8 inches of shaft, so you can buy it in 3-inch, 6-inch, 9-inch, 12-inch lengths from McMaster Car. And the collars, I only need 2 collars, 1 for each side, and they use double screws down through the collar to clamp the collar to the shaft, not just rely on the keyway. It physically clamps it down, and there's a gap between the collar after they're tight, so that should cinch it down really well on a 1/2-inch shaft. So that's the thing. And I ordered the new linear actuator motor, and it did come yesterday, Saturday, so I brought that with me. I'll show that to you here in a bit. And then I also ordered a new switch for the flaps, which was the original flap switch was a 3-position momentary up, momentary down, center off. So now I've got a 3-position in there that is center off, momentary down, so I can lower the flaps. And then if you're doing like not aborted, I want to say you're coming in for a landing and you have to go around and you got the flaps hanging down, before I'd have to hold the switch up and then try to deal with the throttle at the same time, wait for the flaps. So now it's got an up position. Again, my linear actuator behind the seat has a limit switches built into it, so if you flip that up and they come up, they automatically the motor stops anyway. But the only thing this will do is it'll keep the relay energized that controls the reversing circuit for the motor. You have to reverse the wire polarity on the motors to go forwards and backwards. So after they're up, all I have to do is just put that back into center position, and the relay will shut off. But the relays are continuous duty relays. It's not going to hurt them to stay on, but it's just one of those things. But then so let me go ahead and show you. The flaps are up, full up. So I just pushed on this, momentary down, 10, 20, 30, and they automatically stop. So now all I got to do is flip the switch, let go of it. They're up. Now listen if you can hear when I turn off this switch. The relay's right here behind the seat. It's real faint, but you might have heard it. Alright, so they're up. Alright, when I was flying, the oil temperature, I mean, it was pushing 240 degrees. The coolant, water coolant temperature was, you know, pushing that, yeah, this is water temp. You know, it was clear up here, 210 to 220 it was headed for, but it never did make it to 210, or 220, excuse me. It was running at least 210 for quite a bit. As you seen in my last video, I went ahead and popped out those, cut out the holes in the bottom for the flaps or the oil coolers to exit the air better, so I got that done. So that's what I did. Like I said, I got those arms on, but I'm probably going to button this up tonight when I go to leave, and I think I'm going to go back here and I'm going to pull the motor out. It's just a 2 bolts to pull it out, and be real simple to pull the actuator out, unplug it, and take it home, and then I'll design up for the new one. So let me go ahead and show you what the new one looks like. There it is. That thing is a club inside that motor. So this is the mount. It's got a big old mount. That's like a 3/8 inch bolt or bigger. It's metric. Same way up there. Might be like closer to 7/16. But that motor, I think, is like 2.5 inches in diameter. Good 3.5 inches long. And again, this thing's good for 1,320 pounds. So I took and hooked it up to my power supply at home, run it, and you can't even hear this thing. It is so quiet I couldn't even hear it. I didn't even think it was working. And then I could see the actuator coming out. This is a 4-inch stroke, and there are limiter micro switches inside that shuts the motor off. So that's the way that one is. But this one I had modified. I had moved the one switch limiter in like 1 inch so it would stop automatically. This one I may or may not. On the downstroke it'll be okay. I can just I'll be watching the flaps when I put them down anyway, and I can stop them because it's momentary, or I can take this apart and work on a limit switch. It's going to depend on how the old one measures up to this one. They're the same length, so same stroke, so they ought to be pretty close to the same dimensions. Where this anchors, I may have to adjust that, but I need to get the other one out, put them side by side, run them both out, run them both in, and see what the difference is, and I may have to make an adjustment here where this mounts. So that's shouldn't be too big of a deal, but it's basically just got to take a nut off the bolt to pull it off this end, and unbolt the rod end that's hooked out here. There's a rod end on here, take the bolt out of that. I should be able to pull it out and then disconnect the wires. And I'll take it home and sit down and devise a plan to get that in there. I'm pretty sure I don't have any problem with this hitting anything, because this is going to actually has to go in like this, just like that in the plane, behind the seat. So the motor going directly back. The other one, the motor is parallel to the ram, and it's about that big around, and the whole thing's about that long. But I think there might be a little gearbox on the end of it before it goes into the screw mechanism. And this is a real fine thread pitch. It only moves 4.5 millimeters a second, so it's fairly slow. It might be a tad slower than that one, I'm not sure. So, but that's it, folks. That's $50 on eBay. I got it through Vevor, V-E-V-O-R, but I'm really impressed with it. This is all plastic. This is extruded aluminum, and there'll be a lead screw in there that's pretty fine thread, and this is a pretty bulky, and it did come with some metal clamps to attach this, but I should be able to use that mount. I'll have to pull the mount off the rear seat, because again, I think it's only maybe a 1/4 inch bolt, so I'd have to take that bolt, cut it out, and then weld in one that'll fit this, and with a spacer to fit it. But I got to get the other one out to do that. But I was looking to kind of take it up tonight to see if this was going to work. But you know, with this throat, it's just kind of making me so I'm tired, and it's not hot. It was supposed to be 80 today. It's comfortable. It's a little warm, just a little sweaty a little bit, but that flaps I'm just really not satisfied with, even after putting in the other 2 set screws, which some guy did mention that wasn't going to work. He was a machinist and that, and was like, yeah, I understand. but I wanted to try and put it back together just so I could take it out and fly it. I still need to devise up the plan to put the gap seals on the flaps when they're down, so I got to remember to drop these down, take some measurements of the gaps each side, the length, and then I got to sit down and figure out how I want to do it. But that would be the next thing. The flaps physically work. I just want to beef it up, make it stronger, and especially with that motor. That motor could easily bend or snap that original setup in there, so don't want to take any chances with that. As far as the motor, what I've been looking into is getting an oil cooler to put on this. I'm hoping that the radiators drops the engine coolant temp, and then with the engine coolant temps drop, that might help drop the oil temps on the engine oil, because the oil also goes through the gearbox. And one commenter mentioned that he's seen it look like this is discolored, which it is, but I can't remember if that was discolored before or after the flight, but you can tell that it's definitely warmer here. That's right where the gear assemblies is. It's a planetary gear set in there. It's gears out of a C6 Ford transmission, automatic transmission, and that's what causes the reverse rotation from the engine. But what I'm thinking of doing, this is epoxy paint. It's got white primer under it, and then this is basically the underside white, same color as the airplane. But I think it's probably not helping with the cooling. It's got these fins on there to kind of help radiate. So what I may do is come down here, pull the prop off, pull all these nuts off, take this off, take it home, strip that paint off of there. I only painted it because I was trying to get away from the aluminum chalking that you see like on the motor. But I may take that home, strip it clean, and then hit it with my glass bead machine with the Aqua Blaster, and it'll kind of polish and shine it up. But the paint might be helping to hold extra heat in there, because you got a feed line here from oil line. It's got a 1/16 inch restrictor in it to only basically spray a little oil in there, and then it just gravity feeds out the drain back into the tank there. But anyway, there's a couple different options for oil coolers, and this engine's out of a 90 Subaru Legacy 2.2 liter EJ22 2200cc, and they made a turbo version of this engine. And what they did is the factory has a factory oil cooler that bolts on just to the base of the block here. You take off the filter, you take that little center threaded piece out that this filter actually screws onto, and you get a longer one. You put the oil cooler on with the new tube, and then the filter goes on the bottom of it. But the problem is, you can see I don't have clearance to put that in here. So you can also buy a oil filter relocation kit, which you take this off and it comes with an adapter that then reattaches to here. It has two fittings on it, so you can run a hose out to a remote mount filter. You can mount the filter here, up here, make a bracket, bolt it up there, and then by doing that, then I could put the oil cooler up here, and that oil cooler runs off of engine coolant. So coolant from the engine block circulates through that, lowers the temperature of the oil as it's filtering it. And this line right here is the one I can just cut into that, run the hose into the cooler, run the hose out of the cooler, back up in here into my catch can high point, and that would be a piece of cake. So I'd have to buy an adapter, put that on here, mount the oil filter up here with the oil cooler, then the oil filter, and then just two coolant lines. Just splice this, cut that, and in and out, and that should do it. And that oil cooler, Subaru's OEM Subaru one, they're about $140 a piece. So I'm going to look into grabbing some of that stuff and some other tools. Guy just getting out to go mow. A lot of mowing out here. So that's kind of where I'm at. Everything else under the hood looks good. Got the muffler. I'll keep an eye on that, because all I got to do is check it here. And oil level, but I just got to get that oil temperature down, and hopefully this will help. But again, we want to see about 220 on the oil temp. You need to be over 212. Water boils at 212, so any condensation in the engine from running will stay in the oil unless it gets up over 212 degrees to evaporate it. And then that'll all come out through the PCV system, and it gets sucked into the motor and burned. So this is all as if it was still in the car. It's not as neat as the car was probably, because I had to do all this to make it work, but it's a closed PCV system. The oil dipstick has to be sealed. Well, apparently this camera only records for 15 minutes at a time, so this all has to be sealed. You don't want any external air getting into the motor. It'll affect the performance of the computer's fuel trims. So it had to be like Chris Ross from Ross Aero that sold me the gearbox says, put the engine in the plane as if it thinks it's still in the car. Hook up everything that originally has to be on there to make it work. Now, if I was running an aftermarket fuel injection system instead of the original car system, and a lot of this stuff you could bypass. You could just have an external breather, but those generally tend to blow a lot of oil out, and you're like any aircraft engine, you're just constantly adding oil because it's always going out the breather and out of vent tube on the bottom. This one, if the oil comes out of the PCV system, gets burned in and the oil does go low. So, but I did that one flight. It was actually 0.8 hours from the time I started and start time for the engine running. As soon as you turn on the master switch, the hour meter starts clicking. But I turn it on, start the plane, had to warm it up, taxied out, took off, flew, shut down, come back, landed, shut down, and then restarted and taxied back over here and shut down. It was 0.8 of an hour, but it was only maybe like 20 minutes of flying time. But that's the way it works in flying. Whether you put 0.7 on there out of only 20 minutes flying, that's still considered 0.7 hours of flying. So that's how that kind of works. You can't differentiate between the two, engine time versus airframe time. I only have one. A lot of the airplane tachometers, engine tachs, have an hour meter on there to keep track of time of the engine separate from the airplane. So let's see. Again, may pull that gearbox off. I'm going to wait and see what this does. And then, but I'm definitely going to put an oil cooler on it. I just don't have any place to physically put another radiator. There's no room under here to mount a radiator for any airflow. The airflow coming around the cowling is minimal. There's a big hole in the bottom of the cowling for exhaust heat and that to go out. But you're talking about another, pressure inlet versus pressure coming out. There's a gap all around here, but it's not all that great. Maybe over the winter I could take and see the cowling mounts with all these little brackets. I can take and maybe mold on some fake cowl flaps onto the cowling and then come in and cut these out between these, as long as the cowl still can support here, and I can literally make some gaps in here so the air will come out. So if I need some flowing air through here to help pull out engine heat and it'd help with the exhaust. But the only way to do it is to just come into the cowling here and make like a 3-inch tail to come out, and then I'd have to cut the cowling out between each one, and then you wouldn't see it. With the cowl flap on there, you really wouldn't see it. And then it'd give me, they could be an inch and a half out here just to let the air escape. Mostly down here for the exhaust. That's why the big holes in the bottom. So, but that's an option. Even here around the mufflers, if I did the cowl flap come all the way around here, it could actually even come all the way down around here with the cowl flap. So, but I can mold in another strip of foam and fiberglass, and then cut some of this stuff out. Finish cutting out here in between these, because you still need these anchor points to hold everything together. So, all right, that's going to do it for now, folks. Like I said, I'd like to go on up again, but I really want to deal with those flaps. I'm not really happy with them now, and it was always something, those are all designed, and then realizing that it doesn't have enough force to get them down all the way, I'm going to just beef it up. It's not that much more work. I just got to get the shafts, some bearings, some collars, make 4 new arms for it, remount that new motor. It would be just simple wire in and get and go. So, all right, and then we'll see how it goes on the next flight, if this thing's going to cool any better, which I do expect to it. And I kept forgetting to look at the fuel gauge. I remember sitting on the ground like this, it was reading just under 3/4 of a tank. And then when I got back, I forgot to look and see what was left. So I finally stopped here yesterday to grab my manual for the radio, because once I got in the air, the squelch on the radio kicked on, and it was just like, the whole time, and even when I transmitted, it was hard to hear my own self from the squelch. And you got to go jump through hoops to figure out which buttons to push on that thing to get in there, and I didn't know it offhand, but it was on the whole time. Once I got above the trees, the squelch kicked in. So I came down and got the manual and was reading it, and then today when I come down, last thing I just checked before I started this video was to see where the squelch was. Well, the squelch was turned all the way up to 8, meaning it would have to get that high before it would kick on. So I turned it down to 5, which is, if it gets down to 3 or 4, that's when the squelch comes on, the static. And you're supposed to just adjust it till the squelch stops. But it was all the way up on 8, and it was kicking in the air. So I figured, let me try to go backwards, and if it don't, at least I know how. I have to push this button in the corner, F, and then push 0, and then up here with the knob, adjust the squelch, and then push the button again, and then push the mic to get out of the menu. It's just that damn radio's got 1,000 functions in it, and I probably don't know how to use 10 of them. So, and you can't be sitting there trying to look through the manual and figure it all out. It's got VOR on it, which nobody uses anymore. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. I'm going to go ahead and pull that linear actuator out of there, and then I'll sit down, make up a list of parts, and order that stuff up tomorrow from McMaster Car. I'll order it tomorrow. It'll be here Tuesday. It's super great. They have a warehouse right over in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm over towards Erie, PA, and it's just one-day service if they have it in stock in Cleveland or somewhere close, but it's always one day. I really didn't expect to see that. It was coming UPS, and UPS never delivers on Saturday, but they did yesterday. So I got that, and they got the switch. So, all right, folks, as always, I appreciate you taking time to watch these videos. Feel free to leave any comments, questions, concerns, and I'll adjust them as come along. I see my flying video has been doing good. The last time I checked, it was over 21,000 views, which is pretty good. It's not as good as that one from July, 2 years ago. It had, I got 400,000 views on that video. But 21,000, that's remarkable for only a week. And even the follow-up, that looks kind of like this one, my last one, I think that was already over 8,000 views. So it's good. I'm glad people are watching and liking it. And then, like I said, the last one, I will be keeping the videos coming. So maybe next weekend, I'll probably be back here next weekend working on this if I get everything I need. Got to order the bearings and everything. So, and then I got to machine the parts to put the bearings in, the bolt in. So it's a lot of little work, but it's not that bad. It's all, the work's already, the design is already there. I'm just putting in a bigger shaft. So it's not that bad. All right. Again, thanks for watching, everybody, and I will be back with an update on this. I'm not sure. I'm off Monday, Tuesdays to do this kind of work, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm usually out driving my Uber and that. So at the earliest, Saturday, I'll be down here working on hopefully putting that stuff all back together, and then try and maybe get this thing in the air again next weekend. But right now, if I didn't feel this little cruddiness, I would do it. The flaps, I'm sure, would be fine to work now, but I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and fix that before I try to fly it again, just for peace of mind. All right, everyone, that's going to do her, and I will see you guys on the next one. So for now, this is Done or Done out.